Hey, what's up everyone? It's me, One Annie, and this video is going to be a bit different from what I usually put out because it's not going to be as structured as what I usually do. So a couple days ago, yesterday and the 17th and the 16th, Mushokutensei episode 6 released, and people are getting a bit up in arms about it. And for that reason, why? Well, let me explain. So in episode 6 of Mushokutensei, Rudeus, Fitz, and Zaban go to a slave market to look for a slave that can help them with a situation that they're having. Zaban, the person who really admires Rudeus's figures that he makes with his like earth magic and whatnot, he wants to be able to make figures like that as well, but he can't because he doesn't really have any magic, and he can't sculpt it out of clay, which they tried because he has superhuman strength. So they decide that they're going to go to a slave market to look for someone who is either good with magic, good with clay, or somewhere in between. So when this episode came out, I watched it, I was like, oh, okay, this is actually a decently interesting episode because it's throwing in more in-depth characterization for Rudeus and the world overall. And the ending to episode 6 actually had a really nice and really well-wrapped ending. It wasn't, we bought a slave and now we're going to put this slave through the ringer and make them actually hate their lives. It was really cute, saving a dwarvish girl who doesn't understand anything about the world because she was taken away so young and giving her a potential new chance. It was a really, really sweet ending, honestly. In episode 6, after episode 6 dropped, right here, let me drag this over here. After episode 6 dropped, here, let me read this. Series author Rifuji Maganoda commented on the slavery topic that was in the latest episode, and he wrote this about Rudeus, the main character. Rudeus doesn't really have any feelings or hatred for slavery. He feels like it's not necessarily the case that all slaves are universally unhappier as slaves than they were before becoming slaves. So just stopping right there, that's understandable. So this is an isekai, a fantasy world. Fantasy shows and anime, and like TV shows or anime, they often talk about topics that usually end up bringing slaves into it. And like there's tons of isekai that have it in there. Shield hero Raftalia was a slave, and they actually go and free slaves. Like that's a very common topic in that one. Now and then, here and there, it's an older anime about the after effects of massive all-out war and what comes after the fallout, like forced actions upon the opposite sex, or work camps and slaves and fighting for survival, famine. Skeleton Knight in Another World also shows slavery. One Piece has the whole slave auction arc. Iron-Blooded Orphans Gundam, that I'm pretty sure most of the people in that were slaves. Vinland Saga, the season that everybody loves, we have no enemies, which clearly this topic right here is bringing enemies. Yes, Vinland Saga in general is just like, yeah, slaves are a thing. This happens in the world. It makes it feel more real. Then there's From the New World, where the main antagonists end up becoming the group of creatures that people enslaved. And then there's like Magi, and like there's tons of anime and shows that have slavery as a topic. Eventually it's bound to come up because it's usually it is like an easy thing to pull for a topic to talk about, but it will usually either bring up like how the main character feels, if like he should fight to free the slaves or if he shouldn't. It's like it brings up a lot of things where it's like, oh, these people are capturing people, making them into slaves, so we know that they are the bad guy. But Mushokutensei is a special case because everybody in Mushokutensei knows, like all the characters in the world, they are okay with it because it's a medieval setting, it's like a fantasy setting, and slavery is just common. At literally the beginning of season 1, Eris's grandfather has maids which are also slaves. They're all the demi-humans. So this has been happening, like slavery has been a topic in Mushokutensei since season 1. And then there's the part in season 2 where Rudeus, Rudeus, and Eris, they go and free all of the demi-human slaves that are captured underground with the dog, like the dog that all the demi-humans really enjoy. he went and freed them. So there is times where in the show they show that, you know, they are stopping, you know, people that are doing like slave trades and like human trafficking. But then there's points like this where it shows a bit more in depth about how the characters really feel. It is good character building and world developing. But to continue on from here, so while kidnapping is evil, he can't really say with certainty that slavery itself is evil, and he doesn't want to oppose his own sense of justice upon a culture he's unfamiliar with. And right there, that's it. You have to think about it. This is an isekai. Rudeus came from modern day Japan. He is now in a world where slavery is just normal, and growing up from a baby into the adult that he is now, to him, this is normal. Like, slavery is just a normal thing in this world, and he's not gonna, you know, he's not gonna use his 43-year-old mind to be like, oh, I have to stop this. I have to blow up every single city and building in the area that might even think about it, because that's not how you make a good character and like develop things correctly. The reason why Mushokutensei is such a great anime and light novel and manga just in general is because it doesn't do what most other isekai do. It's not basically putting Japan or wherever the main character is from into that world. It's not basically being like, oh, another life in a fantasy world that's somewhat like Japan. This is just a completely new world for Rudeus, and he's not gonna bring what's from the modern day into a new world, because people would probably hate him a lot more, because you don't just walk into some place and try and impose your ideas above everybody else's. That's just not right. A good character struggles with conflicts that he's not quite sure about how to handle. This is just a really good way of handling this, because he doesn't feel bad about it, but he also doesn't find it morally correct sometimes. And like it said here, it's not necessarily the case that all slaves are universally unhappier as slaves than they were before. You could have a character who was getting like physically and verbally abused in their home, and then they end up becoming a slave, and the person that takes care of them might treat them even just the tiniest bit better, and they prefer it way more. Or maybe the slave used to have to like fight constantly every day, but the person that ends up taking them as their slave, they might make them just like a housekeeper or something. Or maybe they just get the same thing. They just get shafted again, and then they end up being a slave that is basically in the same situation as they were before. Everything sucks. So people were complaining about, you know, the character Rudeus, but I feel the author, I believe he did a good job explaining Rudeus, his case about Rudeus. But then people started coming after him, I'm going to assume himself, because then he wrote, I'd like to explain myself. I don't condone slavery personally. Understandable. A lot of people, most people nowadays don't. However, it is true that he wrote Rudeus as someone who is not adverse to slavery. Also, the original story is written with a kind of mild setting where it is accepted. Like I said, it's accepted in this world. Slavery is a normal thing in this world. It is what it is. Because of this, there is no point in making excuses. So it's part of the story, and it actually ends up developing things in a really good way. I don't really have like a really structured way of talking about this. I just find it kind of ridiculous that out of every show that has touched on the topic of slavery in the past like 15, maybe even 20 years, like people are getting so angry about this one. And I'm going to be completely honest, I don't really know the extent to which people are getting angry. I know people are upset about it, but I don't really know how much of a fuss is truly being thrown about it. I just know that people were getting upset that the author seemed like he was condoning slavery when he clearly wasn't. He was just writing an interesting point for his character. I bet 90% of the people that are angry about this haven't even watched the show. I bet they saw something on Twitter that said Mushokutensei episode 6 is condoning slavery, and the main character hasn't blown up 5 city blocks to seek revenge on the people of this town in a world where slavery is accepted. I bet most of them haven't seen it and understood what this show really is. And people might be down in the comments saying, oh, so what, you condone slavery, one Annie? It's just like, no, I don't. You have to think about this. This is just an anime. It's fiction. This isn't based on something real. It's supposed to be a world where you can dissociate yourself with reality and almost do what the isekai characters do and just live another life. You're basically watching another life. It's anime. It just mind-boggled me that people were getting so up in arms about this one. Let me know what you think about this down below, because I'm really curious to actually see how people feel about Mushokutensei getting this much flack over something that is rather common in fantasy, isekai, and just anime in general. Let me know down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video. It's just, this really threw me for a loop, but thank you for watching. Does mean a lot. You know, all the links and whatnot will be down in the description as always, but just let me know. I really do want to have like I want to read some comments and topics about why people are starting to just get this way, you know? So thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Okay.